we are unearthing another unique thing for a Spanish mission, a shell footer, which is a surface, it's called a sleeper. It sits on the surface, so it's not a footer like you bury, but a sleeper that sits on top of the ground. Yes?
What is the convento?
I'm sorry, the convent. But it's not a female thing, so you think it's, but it's the male, it's the friary, more or less. Please ask me if I say things that you don't understand. So we're excavating this along on the, as you saw, on the north, and we eventually were able to define the entire convento on the basis of both this sleeper that wrapped around the eastern and northern side of the convento. We got a series of burned posts that also defined along in the sleeper and also defined the western and southern part of the convento. Here's a picture of one of these squared off posts. Native Americans did not build with squared off posts. They didn't have axes in any way. They would have thought it was stupid because it requires a lot of labor. But anyway, we got perfectly preserved squared off posts defining this whole convento. And I'm going to blow this up. Maybe you can see these little grains of wheat that are one of the very few instances of wheat that we got from any of this. We knew when we were digging this that it was going to have to be reburied. And so because we felt some kind of responsibility for the future, we saved all the shell that we dug up on this sleeper and we put it back. And we also marked all the spaces where we found the burned posts with 4x4s. They look just like them. And you can see our little endeavor here. We had this big party out there when we were doing this. We also built a little bit of a wattle and daub wall, which would have been the main construction technique for both the convento and the church. Here's the front part of that. We actually found a daub processing pit right in front of there. It's a little hole in the ground, in this case a shallow depression. You take some clay, you take some Spanish moss, you oogle it all together there, you make a nice little basketry, weaving basketry thing along there, and you slather it with clay, just like this. And this is wattle and daub. It's a technique that was used throughout the world to create a very permanent and waterproof structure. Spanish peasants used it, Native American peasants used it. In Louisiana, the French called it bosselage. You know, it's everywhere. In the convento, and we were just talking about this, and the convento was divided into 3 rooms. On the western room, there was a very shallow pit, and there was a student that we had that came from Williams College, which was Dr. Dorion's alma mater, and he was working in the cemetery for a while, but we simply had to get him out of there because he was not delicate. And so we had him working in the convento, and I was standing around, and he made a little noise, and he kind of held this thing up in the air, and I went over there, and I looked at it, and I thought, oh good, it's a brass doorknob. It's not anything we can hurt. But it's not a brass doorknob. It was the seal of Santa Catalina, which is priceless, absolutely priceless. Here is an indication of how it would have been used. This is I don't know what happened to my caption. There's supposed to be a caption here that says 17th century Mexican painting that shows this priest with his seal that looks exactly like the one from Santa Maria. And I was saying that I think this single find, the first full field season we were out there, kind of guaranteed us a little bit of staying power that we might not otherwise have had. I was going to talk a little bit about what we found on the Wenigman property, which is down here. Burial or bones were known to have been eroding out of here. They were about to pass a new law that was going to make it very difficult to excavate burials anymore. This is when NAGPRA was going into effect and the state burial laws were going into effect. And so we came down, when we finished with this, we came down here and dealt with this, but I think we're out of time. I'll just go real quickly here through this stuff. On the Wenigman's property, there we are. There's the bank where they were eroding. We see a little bit of post holes. Another sleeper, a little less broad, with big, deep shell-filled post holes. You got your post hole here, and if you can see this well, this is where the post would have been, but it rotted out, and so overlying sand falls in there, so that's called the post mold. Some burials were evidently buried in the church before it was finished. You can see this guy's feet go under the post hole. And it's important, these guys are one on top of another right at the very edge of the church. Here's what we finally found there, about 115 individuals, maybe with a high status area here and more low status people buried on the southern end of the church.
This is a different church?
This is a different church.
Where is this located? That's Santa Maria, right?
Just right, let's see if I can get back there. Not 40 meters from the Dorion church.
Were they concurrently occupied, or were they subsequent?
Well,
This is the Amity one, right?
whoop, that's a good darn question. So here's the Dorion property church. Here's the Santa Maria. This is 40 meters. So we didn't know. When we started working on this, everyone called it Santa Maria de Yamasi. The idea was that this was a Visita church, and the Yamasi were occupying it. But subsequent research and a few things from here indicate that that might not be true. So everybody, as you saw, were buried pretty much parallel with the church. That's very common. There's no east-west thing going on there. The church is generally located with respect to the prominent landform, in this case with respect to the creek. But you got these four individuals, 1, 2, 3, 4, going the wrong way, or a different way. We know that at least one of these guys was after the folks were buried here, because he overlies the feet of these two guys. So by extension, maybe all these east-west facing folks are later. 2 facing different directions are buried in the Christian manner. We're used to. 2 are fully flexed, which is very, very prehistoric. One of them, and you see it looks like this. Now let me just say that this is a big guy, a very big guy, comparatively speaking. So we thought this was the Yamasi Visita. That's what we'd all been told. I didn't do a lot of background research on this because, hey, can't do everything. And I just, okay. So, but probably this is not right. John Worth, who is a fabulous historic researcher and an archaeologist in his own right, has been doing a lot of research in Spain and in Cuba, and he now thinks that this mission was Santa Maria de la Sena, the earliest Mocama mission. So we had always thought that was on the extreme northern end of the island. It apparently, according to John, and again, I'm going to take John's word for it because he knows a lot more about this than I do. Yes?
I have a question. Off the island here, there's a place over here called Gothinsville Park. Over there, there is a small, when they developed it, there was Indian trade beads and early things found there from around the 1702 period. Might there have been a small mission off island right around that area?
Yeah, the little visitas are everywhere. I should probably define that. You've got these big missions established, generally a day's journey apart, but, and all along the coast. But you want, I mean, there's people everywhere, right? So you try to bring people into the mission, but the people that won't come, you establish a little visitation area or a visita. And the priests would go along to these visitas. There was probably what's called an outdoor chapel there. And they would give them trade beads and try to keep them loyal to the Spanish. So those things are all over the place. So anyway, the idea now is, I think I might have to go back, that these folks then are all Mocama. It's unclear what these folks are, but these folks might be Yamasi, who were in fact invited by the Spanish to come in to Spanish territory without converting. The Spanish were so short of labor that they begged these guys to come in and work for them, which they did, until in 1683 they got fed up and they moved en masse to join the British. So they left. Anyway, I think we'll probably really, there were very few artifacts in this mission, even less, but you see this little child about 11 years old with a shell bead necklace. That's a prehistoric trait. We've got one fine case of what's called parodic hyperostosis. You can see that the inner bone has burst through the outer cranial vault. That's caused by iron deficiency that could be due to an iron poor diet or parasites competing for the iron in your body, or both. It certainly killed this 11-year-old child.
I'm sorry, but both these missions were around Harrison Creek?
Yes, right on Harrison Creek.
Okay, south of here, okay.
Yeah, that way.
That way, the other side. Yeah, so there's a lot on Amelia Island, there's no doubt about it. We only just touched on the little bit of area that was Spanish controlled. We don't know very much about what other people were doing at all. And in fact, my dissertation research was not on any of this. It was on, I'm sure you'll be glad that we didn't talk about this. If we can get there. Am I going the wrong way? Yeah. My dissertation was on pottery. So I only analyzed like 60,000 potsherds from Amelia Island and another 7,000 from Santa Catalina on St. Catherine's and another 12,000 from, And I looked at pottery change from the prehistoric through the mission period to see how stable it was. And the answer is remarkably so. And then they let me out of school. And I had to go to Louisiana. Do you have any more questions? Because I've gone on way too long, I'm sorry.
Becky,
Yes.
the flex burial, what would cause that?
They're doing that on purpose.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, it's a traditional prehistoric. Well, for one thing, you only have to dig a small hole,
Yeah.
which makes more sense in a clay area than here. But that flex burial, maybe they think of it as fetal.
Oh.
What did you do with all the skeletons and the bones?
Clark Spencer Larson still has some. A few have been reburied.
At the same site or a different site?
No, elsewhere on Amelia Island. Yes?
So I was wondering, how do you close out a project like that? I mean, did the house ever get built? What happened?
The Dorians never built a house there. They kept saying they were going to, and I think Dottie was just creeped out by the burial. She swore that she could hear children crying, which she's not the first. Mrs. Harrison did as well. And eventually they just sold.
There is a house there now.
I understand that there is. I haven't had a chance to go see it, and I guess I won't, but yes.
Where is the seal? Was it kept down?
Well, I thought that George had donated it to University of Florida for a significant tax write-off, but apparently he has regained control of it. I'm out of that loop now, so I really don't know.
Dorion.
There's a picture of it down in the Temecula.
Yeah.
Well, there's a replica.
We have replicas.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah, we
replica.
did that for replicas.
We have replicas.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm still digging up some pottery on the south end occasionally. Would you care to speculate as to how much more remains on this island?
A lot. And even with all the house building, I bet there's a lot of archaeological material that has enough integrity to be very, very valuable. Not monetarily, but in terms of research.
How deep did you go?
The burials were actually quite shallow in the church floor. They're only 50 centimeters, which is, what is that, like a foot and a half tops? Very shallow. So you can imagine that this is not a real pleasant place, really. But again, this is medieval stuff here, and they're not quite as, they don't have a problem with smells. Yes?
We've been told that there were like evidence of 5 missions on this island. Would that be true, being that you said that they're usually a day apart?
Some were larger entities than others, with Santa Catalina on the Dorion property being the largest. They're in the records. There is mention of 5. Whether or not they're all functioning at the same time is tough to call, and some of those things